we'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. And we'd like to take a moment to introduce everyone on the panel. Starting over towards the left, we have, towards the right, I'm sorry, we have Matt, that's Oliver, June, Sawyer, and I'm Even. And we'll be starting out the meeting with a introduction, and then we'll be following it with a tape, probably a 15-minute segment, which will then be followed by question and answers. And if everyone would be so kind as to hold their questions until the question and answer period, we'd appreciate it.
If you've read the material, then hopefully you'll be prepared for some of what we're going to say, because we have what we feel is a very large picture. It's not the kind of information that's easily digestible by the human brain. And each one of you has a different computer, in other words, a brain, to try to understand what we're trying to say. And so we find ourselves in an awkward, to some degree, position of trying to interface with each one of you in your own lingo. Some of you may come from a background of some religious background, or Christian, or some of you may be Buddhists, or some of you may think religions are all off track. But we know the information that we have can speak to all of you. But it's also going to require of you that you listen and try to restrain judgment of what we're saying. Because the more you can listen, the higher you can reach for what we're saying, and the higher we can reach to try to be decent instruments of the information that we have. We're not channelers, but we feel like we're trying very hard to be in tune with that level above human that is responsible for everything that's been created on this planet. So what is the level above human? That might be one of your first questions. How do you define it? We refer to it as the evolutionary kingdom level above human. A physical place. In other words, where individuals have physical containers or biological bodies, where there are many members. Not necessarily as many as there are in the human kingdom, as there are not as many humans as there are animals in the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. But we are talking about a real kingdom level. It's not the same thing as the astral world, the spiritual plane. We're talking about a place where people do things. They have function, they have activity, they have tasks. They make mistakes. They improve themselves. We use the word kingdom only because it better describes the fact that there is an individual that you could refer to as the king, who we would refer to more as the chief of chiefs, or the creator of creators. And it is his love for the human kingdom, the stepping stone kingdom that he created, to give the opportunity for new membership in his kingdom by giving opportunities for human individuals to make a transition out of the human kingdom. He doesn't have to do that. Those in that kingdom have no need for more members. It is simply their gift to provide options for individuals in the human kingdom to make choices that would find themselves making application into that kingdom.
Maybe another way to come at this large piece of information, and we probably will come at it from several different points of view because it is such a big picture, is if you think about space, and a lot of our minds have been on space in the last couple of weeks with what's happening with Jupiter, and people have wondered, is there an intelligence behind the universe? Or is this all just happenstance? Well, maybe think about it from this perspective, that before the human kingdom, which we're all a part of right now, was, another kingdom actually existed, which is what we're calling an evolutionary kingdom level above the human kingdom. That kingdom existed before the dinosaurs, before amoebas, before anything on this planet. And in a very real sense, this whole planet, or you could call it a garden, is an experiment of that kingdom level. We all here are an experiment of a higher kingdom level, a very real kingdom level. That kingdom level has, like Sawyer was saying, many members. And let's say, for simplistic illustration, that the higher minds in that kingdom decided to have this experiment, and so in a sense they told their design department to design a garden. In a sense, they had to put around it all the elements that we're very familiar with, the periodic table of elements, and all the building blocks of life. And they were all put here not by happenstance, but by design. Everything that, even the very creatures on the planet, are made up of all those elements. They were all put here. The atmosphere around the planet that was designed. And there's this debate, if you read the papers of Christianity, has this debate between creation and evolution, and we don't see any debate there at all, because that kingdom level can put into motion certain subroutines, which you might call evolution. Meaning that certain sequences of the development on this planet of, let's say, containers for creatures to occupy, as the soul has learned more lessons, you could trace, like anthropology can trace various chains or links between, let's say, amphibians, and then all of a sudden there's these missing links. And another creature is actually inserted into the chain, and the anthropologists wonder what happened there. There's this big gap, and that was certainly intentional. I mean, so they didn't intend for us to be able to figure out the whole picture. But if you consider that this is a garden for nurturing souls, and as the soul develops and gets more and more lessons under its belt, or becomes more and more advanced, it needs a more advanced container to occupy. And so more advanced containers were introduced into the planet. And so you have right now a planet with numerous different stratas of life, and animal life, plant life, human life on it. And then periodically throughout the experiment, that kingdom level actually sends representatives down to upgrade the various levels of life on the planet. And there's a history book that records it, which we refer to as the Bible, that interaction between that level above human and the experiment that they were conducting. And you can see, various instances, and they happen somewhat cyclically, of members of that kingdom relating very closely with members of the human kingdom. If you look at the civilization as being roughly 6,000 years, and then you look back to the time of Moses, which was roughly 4,000 years ago, you can see a very close association at that time. The human kingdom at that time was very primitive, and they gave various basic sets of conduct to upgrade the humans. The Ten Commandments, you know, if you're going to, and other ones, you know, related to that, like if you're going to consume, you might as well wash your hands before that. If you're going to sleep around, sleep with one person, honor their father and their mother, very basic things. Then 2,000 years later, they sent another representative, which we all know through the history books, that's the one that was referred to as Jesus. And again, an update was given to the individuals of this kingdom. And that update contained in it information of actually, if you take Jesus out of the religious context and think of, okay, he came from a level above the human kingdom. In a sense, he came from the future to this kingdom to give the individuals on this level what it takes to become members of that kingdom. So in order to do that, he couldn't interface with the people in the bodies that they occupy in that kingdom level because it doesn't work that well. Just like, you know, a long time ago in the Bible, the members of that kingdom could, you know, mingle with the people, but as the civilization progressed, there was too big a gap there. So what happens is that individual from that actual literal kingdom level above human leaves his body there, takes the mind or soul that's in that, that was occupying that body and incarnates, which means takes that chunk of mind and tries to integrate that into the circuitry of a human body, which is very difficult. It's like taking the mind of Einstein and trying to shove it into a dog and trying to communicate. So, you know, if you read the history books, it wasn't until approximately age 29 in the life of the one you call Jesus that that information actually comes in. And they represent it symbolically on the dove, with the dove at the river of Jordan, where John the Baptist says, "Oh, goodness, something's happening here, and this person is not, you know, he's not like me. This is the one you need to look to. He is from another place." And he was from another place. And he brought the individuals at that time up a notch, and he thought at the beginning of his ministry that he would be able to give enough of the basic behavioral requirements of that kingdom for some of the ones who were closest to him, known as the disciples, to actually make an evolutionary transition. But towards the end of his ministry, he knew that he hadn't given them enough information, or they hadn't made enough changes to do that. So he said, listen, okay, that's nothing lost here. Where I go, you cannot come. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And don't worry, you'll be saved, you'll be born again, and we'll pick it up at a later time. Okay, so we're back to the experiment again, 2,000 years later. Just as was prophesied or promised, again, 2 individuals this time were sent from that kingdom. They left their bodies in that kingdom behind. They had physical bodies. They left them there. They took those minds or souls and tried to, again, incarnate into 2 humans that were, you know, pretty normal looking humans, but those bodies had been picked and prepped for this time period. So those minds from that kingdom level, from the future, came in and tried to integrate into the circuitry of bodies or vehicles from this kingdom level, which is an extremely difficult task to do. Again, it's like taking the circuitry of Einstein, shoving it into a dog and trying to explain what, you know, the physics lab is like to the dog kingdom. So it took them roughly 3.5 years to kind of assimilate and put those pieces together, let their brains be able to comprehend enough of the picture to give it out. In 1975, those 2 individuals gave meetings around the country. They called themselves Bo and Peep. Since then, they've taken the names T and Do. They are 2 individuals from that kingdom level. Their task at that time in 1975 was to gather a crew which had had previous association with them from 2,000 years ago, who had started their overcoming, trying to get out of the human kingdom, gather them up. And they did so in meetings. And some of us sitting here are those who have been with them this time to learn the basic behavioral requirements of the kingdom level above the human kingdom. And again, we're getting back to a very real kingdom level, that the human kingdom was never designed as the top of the evolutionary ladder. It was designed as a stepping stone But it's also part of the design to keep humans pretty much blinded to that fact when that opportunity isn't available. There are only certain intervals when that opportunity is available, and that's when representatives from that kingdom are here. So the ones of us who are giving these meetings now have spent time with those two individuals trying to learn the ways of that kingdom level. And we thought that was going to be the end of our task. But as of January this year, it was given to us to know that there are others out there who have also had previous association with that kingdom level, who might be at this point in time ready to end their lessons at the human kingdom and actually take residency or take beginnership in a literal kingdom level above human. And we know this is very, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's hard for people to even comprehend that there is a real kingdom level above human, because we've been so programmed all this time to think of Jesus and God sitting up there on, next to each other on a throne, and you're going to go up there and you're going to strum on harps and whatever. And when you start thinking, no, it's not like that at all. It's extremely real. There's tasks up there. And you don't get to heaven by dying. And that's a big concept for a lot of people to swallow. And that's what we're here to talk about, that you do not get to heaven by, adoring some savior and thinking that's it. And, waking up on some cloud somewhere. It doesn't happen that way.
Sometimes we have referred to the process of separating from the human kingdom and preparing to enter as a beginner in the next level as equivalent to an astronaut training program. In a sense, that individual came 2,000 years ago, whom we recognize as Jesus. He was preparing them to enter a kingdom level from which he had come that they really had very little knowledge of. And he recognized that, as June said, they would have to continue with their lessons at a later time. And we believe that this garden, this planet, is going through a season, if you will, where that door to that kingdom level is open again, where individuals can complete their overcoming process. Or, to use another analogy, complete the construction of their chrysalis and become new creatures. This cannot happen unless individuals are willing to sever all their ties to this world and establish new ties with that kingdom level. Just as a caterpillar must discontinue consuming leaves in order to become a butterfly, so must the human who wishes to complete this transition cease human activity and adopt the ways and behavior of the kingdom level above human. This can only occur while an individual, a representative from that kingdom, an older member, is present, incarnate in a human body to take individuals through that process. It's similar to a sponsor taking someone through the Alcoholics Anonymous program. You can't help someone overcome alcohol unless you have indulged in it yourself and you know what it's like to go through the withdrawal symptoms. The individual who was here 2,000 years ago lived a normal human life until he awakened to his true identity. But he knew what it took to take his disciples through some of the DTs of overcoming and separating from the human world. Our teacher, who is here now, has been through the human experience. He and his father, who also incarnated into a female vehicle, went through a normal human existence for a period of roughly 40 years, living like anybody else. Our teacher indulged in a wide range of activities, experiencing a wide range of addictions to human pursuits, if you will, raising a family, having a career. And now it's his job to show us how we can drop all that and become, like he has become, one who is no longer interested in the human world, but is interested only in serving his older member in the heavens. The kingdom level above human is not a static place. It is a place where growth continues indefinitely. The chief, the creator, is constantly evolving. And there are ones in that kingdom level who are constantly struggling to keep up with him and evolve with him. Of course, no one can grow as fast as he can, but his knowledge is passed down through them to father and son in that kingdom level, if you can think of that term in an androgynous sense, until it reaches the lower levels of that kingdom, when some are assigned the task of coming down here and relating to the human kingdom to show how that transition is accomplished. We are in the process of learning how to draw upon that mind, that source of nourishment from our older member, our representative, while he is here. Because if we can complete that, if we can learn how to adopt the thinking and ways of that kingdom to be compatible with the next level vehicle, then we can survive as newborns in that level. You have to understand that the vehicles or the bodies of that kingdom level are neither male nor female. They do not need to eat. They do not need to sleep. They do not need to reproduce. They have the capacity to communicate with each other telepathically. They have little use for words. If you can imagine yourself as a crew member aboard a ship in the heavens serving the chief, and you have no control over your thoughts, and those thoughts contain desires directed at others aboard the crew, or reactions to their behavior, such as jealousy or inappropriate anger or static of whatever sort may occur, then you would not be acceptable in that ship. You would not be able to function as a smooth member of that crew. It's similar to a human family that is trying to bring a dog into their household. That dog cannot continue to participate in dog activities and scratching the furniture or barking loudly at all hours of the night and day and expect to remain an accepted member of that household. He must adopt certain human ways in order to become welcome there, and in order to join in the human activities. And of course, you've seen dogs that have accomplished that and really think of themselves as a member of that human family. And that human family regards that dog as part of their crew. Well, we know that we desire nothing more than becoming welcome in the household of that kingdom level. And we are striving every day to become more like the representative who is here, who is taking us through this overcoming process. We know that time is short for those who may hear this information and choose to act on it as we have acted on it. We don't believe it will require 18 years of you, those of you who choose to do this. But we do believe that shortly, within this generation, some will exit the human kingdom, will be picked up in what you would refer to as a UFO, a bus of that kingdom level, and be taken into the heavens. The headquarters of that heavens is a real physical place. It has a location within the universe, which we do not know, but we know that these individuals of that kingdom level have the freedom to travel anywhere they wish in the heavens. They are not limited to any particular world or planet.
Quick clarification. I don't know if we made this clear. When we were describing the events of 2,000 years ago, we were saying that the mind from the kingdom of heaven, from the evolutionary level above human, that came into Jesus, that all of a sudden made him a teacher that the whole world paid attention to, really came in at age 29 or 30. And if you study the history of Jesus, you have a big gap. And some people say, well, he went to Egypt, prior to that, or he went to Greece, India, and the stories go on about all these things. Or at the very least, he was an Essene, and he was really an Essene leader, and he just passed that information on. We're saying that any of those could be true. But what we're saying is the history of that vehicle, that human container, prior to the entrance of the mind from the kingdom of heaven, was rather irrelevant, because people said when he showed up and started to actually teach during the 3.5-year teaching period, they said, well, he's just the carpenter's son. I knew him. He grew up down the street. In other words, he's nobody special. How can he be the Christ, the Messiah that everybody's waiting for? So we had the same circumstance here. And what we're trying to say is these minds came in to two human bodies that were already in their 40s. The bodies themselves had had lives prior to that and had gotten into all kinds of things. The minds themselves were for the kingdom of heaven. They had not been into those things. So during the 3.5-year awakening process, you check me if I'm saying this correctly, but during that 3.5 years, in other words, they changed the thinking and the behavior of those bodies to be a match for bodies and thinking that are in the kingdom of heaven. In other words, so that what they're doing is they're going through in a very short period of time the so-called overcoming process. When Jesus said, I've overcome the world, he means I've moved my thinking and behavior from this kingdom level to that kingdom level, and I'm ready to leave. Now I'll teach you, you do the same, and you can leave with me. So in other words, it's not like they got into those things. They simply took over a body that was already into them being pure, and they then changed them over so that the bodies matched their own, thinking. So then we've been in seclusion for 18 years trying to do the same thing. In other words, by the time the class started, the public meetings in 1975, 1976, where we were sitting in the audience, we heard the information and decided, well, it just felt very true to us. And we said, we came up afterwards and said, well, we believe it's true. What do we do? And they said, well, we're going from city to city, putting on meetings, and if you'd like to help us, that's fine. So we did that, and then we started a classroom after doing that for several months. The classroom being, we were with these two individuals for this time, and we actually, spent time living with them, seeing how they acted, how they talked, how they dressed, how they handled a wide range of normal human activities. And we asked them many, many questions, got many, many answers. So we developed what has been called a personal relationship with the representative. And, we were there for 18 years, and for a good years and years, we actually lived in the same houses with them. So when we say that we know how they think or how they act, and therefore what the conduct is in the kingdom of heaven, we're speaking from personal experience. We're not speaking from something we learned in a textbook. But I hope that clarified that a little bit.
Now, we've talked a lot, and I can see all kinds of areas where you probably have questions. Okay, we'll get to those, and we'll try to fill in some more. But don't be mistaken to think that this is a Christian message, Christian information. The one who came 2,000 years ago wasn't Christian by any means. He wasn't part of any denomination. And the terminology that we have now is what we have to talk to you with. And it just so happens that the representative that came, that brought the formula of transition out of this kingdom, he was the one that all those people wrote about and made a religion around. Now, when he left, when he physically left, that's when the dilution of what he was talking about began. And from that point on, it became less and less accurate. In other words, the details and the thinking and even the ability to tune into the reality of that kingdom started to fade more and more, because it was like you weren't a physics professor yet, and you're in a physics lab, and your physics teacher leaves through half the semester. And then what do you got left? All you can do, maybe the best you could do, is try to remember what he taught while he was here. But in order to maintain that comprehension, you need that teacher there to say, no, that's not quite accurate. And why is that? Why would it fade? Well, there's a lot of reasons. But, the human brain itself is very imaginative and always tries to insert things into its own computer in order to justify its own behavior. That's part of it. And when there's no older member there, in other words, a member in that kingdom who has incarnated in the human kingdom to be with you, to physically be able to talk to you and correct you and help you stay on track, well, then there's no way to do it on our own. That's why, the book that people have put together, a bunch of writings, and said this is the Bible, That's why it says that he's the only way, and you can only go through that individual, and you need a personal relationship to do so. It's not Christian. We're not meaning to offend anybody, but it's just not a Christian thing. It's simply an astronaut training program where an individual is trying to interface with students that actually were even prepped beforehand and knew they would even be incarnating themselves in order to finish their classroom. Now, I think I created my own gaps, but the one thing that both, I think, Oliver and, well, we probably all touched upon, is that there is forever options in the human kingdom and in the level above human. They are the most pro-choice that there is. They want people to become exactly what they want to become, as good or as rotten. Now, good in their eyes is wanting to be like the Creator. Because, I mean, there's nothing else that can top that. So what do? They design the human kingdom. And they design all the parameters. Every aspect, every thought. If they didn't design the thought, they designed the ability to think it. And they allowed everyone to make choices constantly. And they also provided someone who would work against them, to provide a certain range of choices that certain people might want to take. It just so happened that because there is continually an option to make choices, that a member that was a member in that evolutionary level above human chose to no longer look to his older member. In other words, every member in that kingdom has someone who's been there longer that he can look to or she can look to in order to get updated information, updated behavior, task assignments. And it's by looking to those older members that we grow. Now, this individual that we're talking about, however it happened, probably happened over a period of time, started thinking that he no longer needed to look through that chain of information, that channel, or that chain of mind of older members to younger members, and said, well, I can tap into this myself. I can do this. My older member, he doesn't make such good choices all the time. I can probably come up with the same thing or maybe something better. I can even improve on the things that he's given me. And so he started to drift apart, looking to himself, thinking that he had gained enough information about that kingdom and had become a significant being himself to where now he could have his own kingdom. Now this level above human was well aware that he was going through this and gave him multiple opportunities to get hooked up again. They do. They give more than adequate opportunities for anybody who starts to go down a certain path that's ultimately going to lead to destruction in a real sense. Gives them many opportunities to change and turn around and say, help me get back on the path, on the straight and narrow, so to speak. But this individual didn't seem to take those opportunities. And he drifted further and further away, and to where it was inevitable that the next level said, okay, enough. We're going to actually send you out of our kingdom. You're no longer going to have that hookup, that connection that will give you eternal life. Eternal life is not something that is, you sign on a dotted line, okay, I believe in this, and all of a sudden you are granted eternal life and you never die and everything. No. You only have eternal life as long as you stay connected to a representative and you hold on to his coattails or that individual's coattails with all your might and hope that you can keep up with that individual's growth and not ever find yourself turning away or looking to some other source. That's when you have eternal life. It's a moment-to-moment thing. Now this individual lost that connection of his own free will. And because of that, he was restricted to the area of the heavens that we refer to as the earth and the garden and whoever. We don't know exactly what the parameters are of the experiment, but he is confined to this experiment. And he is a part of it now. A part of it meaning he is being used as a part of the experiment that gives options to each creature on this planet. And he gives good options from some perspectives. In other words, he's not a person with horns and a tail and red, evil. He doesn't go carve up animals and sacrifice them to the gods. He's a refined individual that knows an awful lot about how a garden grows and how there is a real kingdom level above human. But his intentions are not the intentions of members of that real kingdom of God. His intentions are self-serving and even vengeful against the kingdom that banished him because of his own choices. And so what you see in the world right now is, I don't know what the percentage might be, is it 99% or is it 99.9%? You see his thinking, his desires, his form of evolution or his concepts, which are completely opposite in a lot of ways from true information. And so we refer to what he would say as misinformation. Because he's got several motivations. And he's got a number of individuals that went with him, loyal to him. They were given choices too, but they chose to be on his team. And they are all in opposition. Now, they're not all conscious of it any more than you go to the United States government and you see certain people that are in the know, and then there's certain people behind the scenes that pull the purse strings and really have control, and then there's other people that they just think they're part of some Republican Party or Democratic Party, and they think the president's the top fellow. Little do they know. But so these members that are part of this individual that we refer to as Lucifer, for lack of a better name, that's the name that the history books say that his name was. And he's got a crew of individuals that are working for him, and they know varying degrees. They don't think of him as the devil. There may be some that recognize that he broke away from that kingdom, but they look to him as their captain. And so they've lost several things. They've lost that connection of eternal life, so therefore their souls, and they have souls, are perishable souls. In other words, they will have an end. They will not be permitted to continue ad infinitum. And they also lost the ability to have a physical body that is imperishable. Or maybe I got my terms wrong. An incorruptible soul and an imperishable body. See, in that next level, they have physical bodies that don't need to decay. They're not in a decaying environment. And so they don't need to recycle them every so often. It doesn't mean that one could not be damaged if it was in an environment and there was something that happened by accident or from some reason that damaged it. But if it was damaged, they would not lose consciousness and they would move from that body into another body, just like putting on a different suit of clothes. Now this one that's called Lucifer, that body that he had when he was in that kingdom started to decay. It was no longer connected to an eternal vine in a real sense. And so what does he want? And what do other members in his crew that also have decaying bodies want? They're looking for new bodies so that they can incarnate into him. And they know it's a very simple thing. They know how to just move out of one body into another one. It's like putting on another suit of clothes. And they even teach it to others. Leave your body. Travel in the astral. Be an ascended master. And what are you ascending? Sorry, we hate to hit some of the sacred cows, but it's his thinking that is the whole mindset of cosmic consciousness. Universal mind. These are his terms. He is the one that thinks that he can tap into the universal mind of cosmic consciousness and is a God himself. Members of the level above human we're talking about, they don't want to be gods. They don't want to be looked at by other people as something special. They just happen to possess a link. And so when they're given a task to be a link and demonstrate what they know so that younger members have a chance to become members in that kingdom, well then it's their honor to do so, and yet they do so with real humility because they don't want to really be seen as anything special. But these individuals that say, oh, listen to me, you've got the God within you, you can be a God yourself. The funny thing is that there's truth to it. And there's always truth with the misinformation. You know, there's that saying that the CIA wraps the truth, or 2 bits of misinformation around 1 bit of truth. And they send it out, and then people buy it. They buy the whole package. Well, the CIA didn't get those ideas on their own. There's a lot of people pulling the strings behind the scenes, behind the human scenes. And that's what we refer to as space aliens. That's what we refer to as Lucifer and his crew, and any individuals who have become in service to him. And it's a big picture. We're not going to talk about a lot of that here, but we wanted you to have at least that segment of it, or anything you all want to add.
I wonder if we could just describe a little bit more, since our poster does address the UFOs and the space aliens. What Sawyer was talking about, the Luciferians, we all kind of lump into one category, but like he said, long time ago, and most of these space aliens don't even know where their beginnings came from, they separated from that kingdom and proliferated. So there are many races of space aliens that have been reported, whether they're Pleiadians or Arcturians or whatever. You know, if anyone has delved into the UFO literature and discussions and whatnot, you know that there have been many different races that have been recorded. And they are all offshoots of the initial Luciferian, for lack of a better term, well, there wasn't really a kingdom, but from that segment of the heavens. And like we said, they don't know their beginnings any more than most of us sitting here really know our true beginnings. And just like, you know, the average government worker, like we said, doesn't know the government behind the government, you know, most of them feel like they're doing a service or whatever. And these space aliens are no longer a literal kingdom level above the human kingdom. Like we went before, we have the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, and then the evolutionary level above human, which is the kingdom of God, where they no longer, you know, lose their body. Their bodies are imperishable. But yet the ones who fell from that kingdom, who no longer look to that kingdom, have fallen back into the same kingdom level as the human kingdom. In a sense, they're human equivalents. They do have advanced technology. They were in that kingdom. They brought some of that technology from their beginnership in that kingdom. They kept some of that knowledge. They brought it with them. They can travel in advanced space travel hardware, UFOs. They have advanced genetic engineering. And if you've read many of the accounts, abductions, you know, whether you've read John Mack or, you know, whoever the latest book is, you know that the alien races have been doing a lot of experimentation. Whether it is taking biological material or taking fetuses or whatever, they have that capability. They have advanced holographic capabilities, meaning they can do things like Medjugorje or Fatima. They can masquerade to the humans as gods, and they do. They can manipulate the human population in that way, just like, you know, say during World War II, and the primitive tribes on this planet saw planes going overhead, and they made monuments and they worshipped them. Or a fellow, actually, this is a true story. He crashed into one of these tribes and they thought he was a god. And he kept saying he wasn't a god, but he knew how to do all sorts of things that they didn't know how to do. He could do wells, he could do all sorts of, you know, irrigation and technology they couldn't do. So he couldn't convince them they weren't God. The same thing happens with the space aliens. They are masquerading to the population as gods. Another thing that they've done, which is try to keep the human population blinded to the fact that they're here. I mean, many of you sitting here must believe enough that there are UFO sightings to be here. But much of the population and the media they won't even stick their neck out and put out a story about UFOs because they feel like they'll be ridiculed. And that strategy isn't one that is happenstance. It's very much a strategy, because as long as most of the population believes these things aren't happening, or at least if they are happening, it's not happening on a large scale, it won't happen to me, then they can continue doing what they're doing without anybody getting too disturbed about it. And part of what we're trying to do, even though it's a small part, is expose the fact that this is happening. Like we went back to the experiment. This certain part of the heavens was designed as a garden or a womb for developing souls, which means all the genetic material is here that is needed. The parts of the heavens that they, in a sense, were restricted to long, long time ago don't have all those necessary raw materials or biological materials. So they come here just like a city person goes to a farmer for ingredients that they need, that they don't have. We have genetic material here because of whatever positioning we ended up with on this planet in relation to other planets, their sun or whatever, that they don't have. Long periods of time in space causes the reproductive system to atrophy. Even our own scientists have figured that out. So the long periods that some of these races have spent in space has caused a certain, they call it backside the genetic curve or deterioration of their species. They come here to get new genetic material in order to improve their species. So even though their intentions are not, quote, malicious, they're using this planet and its resources for their own end. I mean, that's just, they've done it for a long period of time. They continue to do so. And it isn't really right for them to do so, but it's just, again, it's part of the equation. It also offers choices. They can and they do bombard the atmospheres of this planet with radio waves. Each of us has a receiver, and we often don't have a good seek and scan to know exactly what we're picking up. And these alien races have been very effective in keeping the population, segments of the population, anesthetized to what's happening. One very potent drug or technique they've used, if you look at what's happened, we know if you've studied UFOs in the last 40 years or so has been when the increase of sightings has really increased. But even if you look in the last 20 years of how much more, let's say, sensuality is used to sell products, or how much more the society is more taken with that, or more concerned with their own desires, the sensuous nature of the plant, whatever it is, that was designed purposely for the fact that the alien races also knew that there would be a time period when this actual evolutionary level above kingdom would send again representatives. And they also knew that if they kept the containers or the bodies that we're wearing very preoccupied with their own senses, that we'd be less likely to recognize what was happening. And if you look around you, you can't buy a tube of toothpaste or a car or whatever without it being sold with a sensual point of view. And part of, in a sense, overcoming or weaning yourself from the human kingdom is to, in a sense, just like an alcoholic, to abstain from that activity for a certain amount of time until you've abstained from indulging in sexuality or sensuality. You don't really know what perception can be attained without having done that. Just like an alcoholic, he doesn't know, everybody else can see that he's pretty well intoxicated, but he thinks he's seeing things just fine. Maybe he's only had 2 martinis and everything is just fine. And everybody else knows that he's not seeing the same reality that they are. It's the same thing with sensuality. It's the hardest drug on this level to overcome. And it has no bearing on morality or, religious reasons or anything like that. Part of the reason is that level or that way of reproduction is not, it's more akin to the animal kingdom. It is not the way members of the kingdom of heaven reproduce. The way they reproduce is to get their young from this kingdom level, having overcome that level. And so that's one of the things that will allow you to see, in a sense, a perception of what's going on. So again, going back to the space alien races, they're doing a pretty good job of keeping most of the population blinded to what's happening now. They've done a pretty good job of putting so many copycats out there, whether it's, go to the astral plane or do this or do that, that most people are thoroughly confused. And when someone comes along and says, we've got the truth, we've got the picture that you've been waiting for, everyone says, sure, like everybody else. And that was designed as a strategy as well. It's all choices. And it's up to each individual to decide what is really the truth here. And it was made confusing. In a sense, like we started out saying, that kingdom level doesn't need any of us. And you could say, well, that's a very cruel kingdom level. Why did they put us all here? You know, we can't question the design. We know that they can exist perfectly well without us. But we also know that they're more than happy to assist or help anybody who exerts the effort to see what's happening and wants to move forward, wants to really know the truth. And we're trying our best, and we know that we're clumsy instruments to try and sort through so many of the strategies and misinformation that's out there.
We know the next level is very fair. We may not understand how they judge things. We're not in that position. We're also not here to convince anybody that this is true or persuade anybody that this is what they should do, what we're doing. We're merely presenting information that we know will speak to a very small number of you. And those of you that have received a deposit of recognition will not be able to deny it. You will recognize that this makes sense to you. You will know that this rings a chord inside that says, I've got to check this out. We don't know how or why or what criterion the next level uses to make the decision as to who receives a deposit and who doesn't, any more than we know why there was only a small segment of the globe within which Jesus traveled to share his message. But we do believe that the United States, and especially the Western United States, seems to be a focal point for the gathering of souls that have received a deposit of recognition, that will have the capacity to act on this information. We are recognizing that individuals who choose to do this will receive the help they need to accomplish what we have accomplished in 18 years in a much shorter period of time. We don't know why that is. But since January, we've witnessed a number of individuals join our ranks and learn things almost overnight that took us weeks and months to accomplish in the 18 years in the classroom. Some of us could choose to feel jealous about that. On the other hand, some of us can also recognize that perhaps these minds simply brought less baggage with them, and they have less homework to do. We don't know. But in any case, if you do choose to follow this, if you recognize that your path is taking you to the top of the mountain, and you see this as the only way off, and if you ask the highest source of goodness that you know for help with what to do in making a decision one way or the other regarding this information, you will receive that help. We plan to show you a tape this evening of our older member, so you have some idea of what the representative is like that is incarnated this time in a human body. We will take time after that tape to answer your questions. And those of you who decide that this is something that you need to act on, we welcome you to come forward, but we want to warn you this is the most difficult decision, the most difficult thing a human can do. And if it is something that you want to do, you must convince us of that. We're not about to try and convince you of anything.
One other thing is that probably before we show the tape, if anybody feels like you've heard enough and that this isn't for you, you won't offend us at all if you would care to leave. Because we know, again, that what we're saying speaks to a very small segment of the population, and we're not out to convince anybody of anything, because everything is choices. And You have to make your own choices.
We could clarify one quick thing. You may see us sitting up here, and especially if you hung around the college campuses, you may feel like, well, this is another group, or another bunch of people that are on the speaking circuit, or something. I mean, we don't know what you think. But to clarify, we're a group of individuals that, like we said, we were in seclusion for about roughly 18 years, and in January, we felt to sell everything that we had, again, as we had done in 1975. This time, we sold what collective property we had, got rid of it all, went on the road with just what we needed to get this message out from city to city. And we have no base of operations, no monastery, no corporate headquarters. We're not selling any videos. We're not selling any books. We're not a business. I mean, we're not an organization. We're a group of individuals, and we've all practiced what we are telling you. We've been celibate. We wear these rings, and you may say, well, they look like, there's some couples down here. These are rings denoting that we've committed ourselves totally to the kingdom level above human. And we're not available to anything on this level. And we're very happy to announce that that's the case. We found more satisfaction and happiness in doing this than we ever found in the world. And some of us, these bodies we're wearing, were well involved in the world, in anything you can imagine. So we're talking from experience. We're not talking from, some kind of pristine, ivory tower. So what we're talking about is what our real experiences have been, and we made these tapes asking our older members some questions. At the time, we thought we might put these tapes out in the sense of going public with this information. This was done a couple of years ago. We realized that it was sort of premature, and we did not do that. So we actually started going public in January. But we're not, funded by anybody. We're totally doing this from day to day. We don't know where we're going to be next week. We're literally on the road, in our cars, traveling, and giving out this information to anybody who has any interest in it. And it's free. Everything that we do is free. But if anybody wants to help us, we'll be happy. So you want to go ahead and...
Sure.
Question.
Sure.
And this is not a giant big screen TV that fills the whole front, so you may need to come down a little bit to be able to see it if anybody wants to move down.
And all we really did was just pick out 15 minutes from a tape that is a couple years old. So hopefully soon we'll have a new tape that would be more appropriate for the times, but at least we'll give you an idea of who we're talking about and a feel for the one we call our older member, or refer to as Doe.
Partly we've noticed from past experience that some people are expecting a certain thing. I mean, to have flowing robes and long hair, or to have a shaved head and a saffron robe, or to look like a college professor, or something. They have a preconceived notion. I mean, I'm sure we all did when we first heard about this information. And this way you'll actually know what the person is like, and what it's like when a member of the kingdom of heaven is actually in a human body and using it to talk to you. And it's, I think you'll...
Oh, we need to use thinking.
So far, there's no
No, as you can see, we're not using next level technology.
Oh, it came undone.
The old wire came undone trick.
This is our last session, but that might change. My feeling is that it will be our last session of this series. We want to get right on with the series. We have some things to talk about that kind of round out our whole close up, or our summary, our bottom line. And I want to introduce to you Jim on my left, who will be helping me with this session, and his partner Glenn on my right. And I'm going to ask that they feed me questions as we have prepared our little outline, hopefully in accordance with my older members' instruction. So let's get right to it. And
Well, that give you some idea. Like we said, that tape is a little bit old, and it's probably not as appropriate to this meeting as maybe some other material that might be taped in the near future, but that'll give you an idea of who we speak of when we're talking about our older member. Now, we'd like to open it up for questions, and Eben is going to help us field the questions.
Also wanted to say that if you feel like this isn't what you came for, and this is putting you to sleep or whatever, anyone's welcome to leave. We're not going to take it personally.
Any question? Gosh, we must have did a good job.
I'm sure there's some questions.
Give them a moment.
Trying to figure out what they are sometimes is the hard part.
Actually, why is this all so vague?
Well, what?
I don't know anything more now about who you are or who the representative is than when I walked in the door a half hour ago, 45 minutes ago. It just all seems very, very vague. I definitely have just as many questions, if not more, now.
Well, if you could be specific, we know that you have to bear
Okay.
with us. We're not, we've been in seclusion for 18 years, and our description of this material is probably, lacking. And if you could help us know where your areas are that we've left unclear, then we could help fill them in. That'd
I
probably be
mean,
the
you're not
best.
Scientologists, you're not subgenius, you're not.
That's right.
No.
What is this?
It's a good question.
If we could summarize it as a bottom line, it's a window of opportunity for individuals to graduate from the human kingdom into the evolutionary level above human. That level is a physical level. It's equivalent to or comparable to a dog graduating into the human kingdom, but it's a much bigger leap than that. And it only has happened, this is the first time it's happened in this civilization, and it's not likely to happen again in this civilization. Does that clear up anything?
It happened 2,000 years ago.
It did not happen 2,000 years ago. None left with Jesus. He thought some might go with him. There was a door open at that time, but none were ready to leave with him.
So this is basically a migration for souls that are we here to purify ourselves and then travel on? Is that what you're saying? Do we meet up at Devil's Mountain and take off at an appointed time?
No, it's not that easy. Okay.
Is this a physical craft we're talking about?
Yes.
However, the physical on this level, and your comprehension of physical, is not necessarily going to comprehend all the, this planet, this garden, this environment was created as an experiment. The physics themselves are part of the experiment. The laws of physics do not apply to the next level as they apply here. They can do things with travel, and they're not restricted to the speed of light. They can, if aliens can bend time and space, the next level has technology that goes far beyond that. Okay, now, the one thing you're not going to find here is you're not going to find an affiliation with this group or that group or that group, because the whole human kingdom to us is something we're outgrowing. And so, although we support everyone's right to do what they want to do, and some have better projects than others, we are not affiliated with any of those. But we are affiliated with a movement that was begun a long time ago, before these physical vehicles can remember, where individuals were picked. Just like, if you can really understand a simple analogy, which it's like a rancher. Okay, he needs some horses in his stall. He needs some to pull the little cart. He might need some to plow the field. He might need some to ride or to develop in some way. There's a show horse. He's got a need or a desire to have some new horses in his stall. So he goes out, and there's lots of horses in the field. They're wild. So he picks a bunch of them. He chooses a bunch of them. It might seem like a random method, but he may even have a method of choosing the horses just based on how he sees them in the field wild. He gathers them to his ranch, and then he starts to train them, and he assigns people to help him train those horses. And some take the training, some don't. The ones that don't take the training, they go back into the wild. They're not really usable for his need. But the ones that do take it, he continues to train, and those horses themselves even start to recognize that they're enjoying the service that the other horses that are wild would say, oh, look at that, they finally captured that one and they made him a slave. But all those horses that are in the service of the rancher now are saying, whoa, I'm glad I'm not out there anymore, just running around like, with no direction. And that's who we are. We're just some horses that were somehow gathered around and are trying to be trained.
How many of you are there?
Well, there's less than 4 dozen, but we don't keep track of, maybe that's not even accurate. We don't keep track of exact numbers, right down to the one, because everyone's got the choice to come and go as they please within the training program. If you sign up for the training program, and there's nothing to sign, by the way, it's your presence and your intense desire to be a part of it. That's the only signal there is. Then you still have the choice every moment of every day to say, this really wasn't for me. I need to leave. And we've even helped people over the years do that and helped them even gain back part of their life to some degree. Because this isn't an easy step. When we talk about an overcoming classroom, there's no blackboard. I mean, there may be at times, but there's no place where you go and you sit in chairs like these and you listen to lecturers. On the other hand, there are times where our older member would be talking to us like we're talking to you and giving us lessons. And there are times when he works on one-on-one with people, helping each individual with their own individual package of all kinds of characteristics that need to be overcome if anyone ever expects to be compatible or not an interference in that next level. There's a laboratory for the next level to do anything they want to do. The weather patterns. This whole thing was designed, you understand? And it's really a beautiful, neat thing when you can see it from the perspective of knowing it's not a spiritual concept. That individuals sat down and put their heads together and said, how can we do this better? How can we produce an environment where a soul would have virtually nothing in it and start to draw on information that changes its behavior and it acts differently and it becomes a new creature, and then the next level takes it into their own house, in their spacecraft, in their environment, in their laboratory, and says, you can learn everything. You can learn how to even participate in creation itself, not by breathing the breath of life, not by envisioning something and it appears. Not to say that very old members in the next level could not do that, but the mechanism of creation isn't an etheric activity. And so we're being trained how to be beginners in those laboratories.
You just kind of touched a little bit on, you said maybe
Well, the next step for anybody who was really seriously considering this would be to talk to us personally, because there are, you know, different considerations. Each person's life is enmeshed in different ways, but pretty much what is involved is you walk out the door of your life. In a sense, you have to literally leave everything behind. And then in a sense you come and you begin your overcoming process, meaning that you come with us. And
Well,
you,
I mean, that may be maybe more where my question lies, is physically. I mean, as you said, right now you're on the road, you don't know where you're going to be next. I mean, where would I actually come to? Where would I go once I go home and sell everything I have in my apartment?
right?
Where do I go? Where do I-
Well,
you know?
Well, that's a good question.
We can't answer that right this moment, but we would work that out with you.
We stay in touch.
The way it happened with us in 1975 and 76 was, after we attended a meeting, we felt that compelled to pursue this, we received some information about a follow-up meeting. We attended that, and then we were given a point of destination. For this individual, I happened to hear the information in Oregon, and I was given a destination in Colorado. I was gone 3.5 days later.
But each individual circumstance is different, and that's why we like to talk to individuals on a one-on-one basis if they're actually considering doing a step like this. Like we say, it's something that is the most important decision, the most difficult decision you will ever make in your life, and we don't take it lightly. And we, like we said, we make sure that this is something someone wants to do and knows what's involved.
We have a number of people in the audience
Right.
that are actually with us who have joined us since January. So, and they may be able to shed some light on it for some who want to ask them who are, you know.
I think there was an individual in a white T-shirt up there that had a question.
I have a question. I kind of gotten some glimpses of things, some little bits of information that I've seen in books, read in different sources, not all of the same book, that have led me to a roundabout idea of what I think is to come. And it's led me here. And I'm kind of curious what relationship this has to meditation, chakras, energy, and like light beings and sources and
Guess I'm elected. Well, that's a good question, because I think a lot of people in the audience have probably, as they start searching, they start reading more and more of these books. And if you go in a good, large metaphysical bookstore or even a health food store, you'll see on any subject on this planet, there's a whole array of books. And they contradict each other. And at the same time, say they have the answer. So it's very, very difficult to sort out the misinformation from the truth. And it's like the ones that we spoke of as the Luciferians, the whole way that they work here is to purposely fill these books with enough truth and enough misinformation so that you wind up not being sure. We can tell you this, there's no spiritual techniques or meditation involved in overcoming the world, in getting from this level to that level. You learn to quiet your mind, you learn disciplines, but you learn it with hands-on. In other words, it naturally occurs the same way it was occurring 2,000 years ago. When you read the Bible, it doesn't speak about a whole bunch of spiritual techniques. What it speaks about is you leave the world behind and you go in partnerships, where there's 2 or 3 gathered in my name, I'm present. Same principle. You go around in partnerships and you do daily tasks, whether it's postering, fixing cars, making meals to consume, doing your laundry, many, many things that a lot of you already do. But you do them not the way the human would do them, you do them as a member of the next level would do them. And the only way you can even know what that is to have a representative in the flesh to actually be an example. Now we, of course, are not older members. By that we mean we have not yet, at least to the best of our knowledge, earned what the Bible refers to as a glorified body. In other words, this body that is genderless, androgynous, that doesn't need to eat, sleep, do any animal activities. We have not earned it yet. We're in the process of it. The older members that came here had already overcome the world, whether on this planet or some other planet, long, long time ago. And they already knew what they were doing. So they could very quickly overcome it and teach us. Now, to get there, what you do basically is learn to do everything that you do 24 hours a day, from your thoughts to your actions, as a member of the next level would do them. And to do that, since, in other words, the way that you overcome your human addictions is first, like any 12-step program, you identify them and admit them. You say, okay, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a sexaholic, or in other words, I have a bad temper. The body I'm using, the horse I'm trying to break, because you're the soul. In other words, you're the rider, you're not the horse. So you're learning to get the horse to act like a member of the next level. The horse is a wild animal. It thinks this is crazy. So what you're trying to do is, while in that hardware, change the software to be a match for that kingdom. So you need hardware. So in other words, you can't do it while out of a body. You have to have a body, but you don't need to do a whole bunch of spiritual techniques. All you need to do is automatically do everything the way you learn to do it in the classroom. That's why he called it a classroom. You learn to do everything as a member of the next level would do it, and you automatically go through a changeover. It's really hard to understand, because until you do it, we know we've done it enough. Not that we're perfect, but we've done it enough to know how it works and that it works. You don't know that yet. But we can tell you that you go through, and the new people can tell you that you go through automatically all the experiences that will allow you to change your thinking and behavior to be a match for that level. And it happens, it's guided by the kingdom of heaven, by the evolutionary level above human, in a way that we don't understand anyway. You know?
Yeah, no,
Maybe
no,
they can
that's
help.
the same thing.
Maybe we need to be more specific. For instance, okay, the basic things that we don't do. Okay, we don't drink alcohol. We don't do things that alter our consciousness. The only time we take a drug would be a prescription drug, and we don't automatically take it just because some doctor says that's what we're supposed to have. We might take it sometimes, and sometimes we might not, based on a lot of variables. We don't smoke cigarettes, of course. We don't we don't smoke marijuana or do LSD, or we don't try to raise our consciousness by eating mushrooms, or we don't sit in certain positions to do yoga exercises. Now, those things, we're not saying these things are all bad. You know, we don't do them because we don't not do them because they're bad. Okay. But we're trying to eliminate everything that is an influence of this world that would take our mind and our consciousness away from connecting with our older member who's here physically, who is connecting with his older member who is not here physically. And so we've got a chain of mind with our older members. And our older member is not just someone who he's on the tape and he just, says these things of wisdom. No, he's someone that in any area, any department, and I'll give you, this is the bottom line, this is truth to the core. In any area, if you ask him a question, he'll come up with a better answer than you've ever heard before. Now, he's not an egotist. If he doesn't know the answer, he tells you, I don't know the answer. And sometimes he says, well, I think this might be the way it is, and you can try this, but I'm going to go in my silence and I'm going to start talking to my older member and see if I can get even a better understanding. So he's an individual that is not static at all. Our concepts here, we could talk to a blue in the face about the space aliens and about a lot of things, and for all we know, some of it's going to be inaccurate, some of it's going to be accurate. It's not that important, but the overcoming process is something we can testify to right down to the letter because we've been involved in it with our own package. For instance, when thoughts are going through your head randomly, when you automatically have a negative response to anything that happens, when someone says something to you and you look at them and you say, you're looking at me kind of funny and I don't like your attitude. Now I can have all those kind of thoughts and I can live with those kind of thoughts and think that's normal behavior. But in the next level, they don't even speak. And so their thoughts are as loud as a loudspeaker. It's like telling somebody they're no good or telling somebody they're, why do you have that ugly look on your face and you're such a negative person? we take those kind of thoughts and we say, I don't want to have those kind of thoughts anymore. I want to recognize that if there's anything you all could do to me, I can benefit from examining it. If you can, for instance, we're in partnerships, 2s and 3s, not because it's something in the Bible. We're in partnerships in 2s and 3s because it provides a working arrangement where you're constantly faced with interfacing with other individuals' computers and souls using those computers. In other words, we all have the same desire to rid ourselves of anything that separates us from what would be a beginner in that next level. And it's hard to explain. I know I'm going around Jericho, but the point is that we all have characteristics, different characteristics. You get two people together and they get married, and they find out that all the characteristics they didn't like, even though they liked enough about each other to hop into bed in the beginning. And that lasted for a while, and then they found out, well, how do we live with each other? Okay, now these partnerships, they don't have the bed to fall back on to solve their problems, okay? So what they do to solve their problems is work it out. Figure out, okay, you got one idea, I got another idea. What's the right idea? What's the best way of doing this? What would our older member do in this circumstance? And he's objective. He doesn't have an interest in a relationship with us, like a physical relationship, or he doesn't need us to be his students. So he gives you an honest answer. You ask him, what's black and what's white, and he tells you what's black and what's white. If you don't ask, you don't get. And so we're talking about relationships where you're with people around the clock. There's no thought of, this classroom's fine right now, but I think I need to go down in the corner and get myself a Coke or a pizza. But we say, if you want to go down in the corner and get a Coke or a pizza, go do it. But we don't know if we're going to be here when you get back. Because this classroom is a crew of individuals trying to learn to work as a crew, like as if you could take us, put us on a spacecraft, and we wouldn't have a desire to walk in space just because we thought it was nice out there, and be subjecting the whole crew even to danger. So we think in terms of unselfishness. This is what the Eastern religions talk about, not having self. Well, we know what that is in real life, how to get rid of self. And that is when you care more about supporting somebody else, your partner. You care more about their ideas, their perspective, than you care about yourself and your own ideas, your own ego, and your own, all the different characteristics of the human kingdom. Maybe you can help fill in a lot of
Not to make this one answer too long, but I think one thing that, now that you got us going on this, one thing that we may not have discussed thoroughly is that we're talking, we are definitely separating what's inside these containers from the containers. Whether it's your spirit or your soul, that is separate from your flesh body or your container. Your container, your flesh body, is a genetic package that was handed down, which has, in a sense, a mind of its own. It's got characteristics of its own. If your grandfather was grumpy in the morning, your father was grumpy in the morning, you're grumpy in the morning, you got it. It's there. And that might be something that you might want to change, because if you're on a crew and they're depending on you in the morning, they know they can't depend on you to 10 a.m., that's something that you work on.
Not your coffee break.
You may not even recognize that characteristic is undesirable because everybody in your family had it. And these things, if you work with individuals that, you may look at us here and we may look pretty much the same. When we came in, we came from 180 degrees, 360 degrees spectrum. We had businessmen, we had hippies, we had housewives, we had people who came from all walks of life, and that wasn't, happenstance. That was the way the next level put our minds or souls into these bodies. And if you get partnered with somebody and you were a hippie and the person was a businessman, you're obviously going to have some differences there that are genetic or whatever, and you're going to, the soul, like we went back to the horse and the rider. The body is the horse, I'm the rider. I'm going to get that horse under control. Part of the reason of this overcoming process and what we're going through is to learn, in a sense, muscle of the soul, to be able to take this machinery, which is a primitive, crude machinery, and get it to perform the way I want it to perform. Not the way it wants to perform, not on some whim, not have some temper tantrum when it wants to. Anger, if I want it to have anger and it's appropriate, that's fine. But if it just decides to do it on its own, then I don't have control. I don't have the reins. So I'm certainly not going to be able to get control of another vehicle or container that's got much more refinement and much higher capabilities and capacities if I can't control this one. So a lot of what we're doing is building muscle of control, getting performance out of your vehicle that you never demanded of it before, and you never knew that you had idiosyncrasies before until you're put in circumstances. And part of the overcoming process is, we've been partnered in our classroom with almost every individual here. And it's not, a relationship like a human, like we said, where you fall back on, other things. You are learning things about yourself that you never knew that your container necessarily had before, or sometimes even your soul, and learning to get control of that and trying to get a behavior that's more a match. I mean, most of you have in your consciousness some idea of what an angelic being, how they would behave, even though we don't want to use religious terms. But we are striving for a behavior that's more refined. That kingdom level is much more refined in their relationships and responses than this kingdom level. Just like the human kingdom, hopefully, for the most part, is more refined or more advanced than the animal kingdom, although it's debatable at times. But we are trying to learn a behavior and a conduct and a control that's a whole kingdom strata above where we are now. And that is, it's a literal training process that we're going through. It's nothing spiritual, nothing religious about it. We're trying to learn the basics of control and behavior. It's just very simple.
Are any of you in touch with your families after all of these years?
We'd like to answer or address people who raise their hands, if you wouldn't mind, because there are other individuals in the audience who have questions, have been waiting patiently to ask them.
And I think this man in the middle here was next.
Does the Creator have a physical body?
Well, yes, he does. But for us to really talk about it, first of all, we don't know what it would be like. Okay, it's like a dog trying to understand what's happening in a corporation's boardroom. We just don't have the computer itself. These brains is like a 8086 computer as compared to a Cray or something. Okay, and so we don't really know how to talk about that. But we understand that he does have a physical body, but it may be a physical that we wouldn't define in the physics of this planet as physical. Is that appropriate?
You say you don't drink and you don't smoke. What type of food do you eat?
Well, we've been through a wide range of different types of diets over the years. For a time we thought that perhaps it was to help purify these bodies in preparation for our eventual transformation into new creatures. And so we experimented with vegetarianism. We tried fruitarian diet for a while. We were on a lemonade fast for 38 days. We're on a water fast for 12 days. And what we finally arrived at was that these were simply all experiments in determining whether or not we were willing to adapt to that diet, trusting that the outcome would be for our best interest, in our best interest. And the byproduct of that effort was a type of flexibility and recognition of resilience that we didn't have prior to that. But at this point in time, we pretty much consume whatever is offered to us outside of seafood and anything that's obviously not fit to eat. Seafood we primarily don't eat simply because the standards of what's okay and what isn't okay in that industry are somewhat questionable at this time, and the oceans and rivers of this planet are pretty badly polluted.
Some people are rightfully concerned sometimes with diet and consuming, and we do feel like originally when the planet was first set up, perhaps, if you go back to the records, it was more appropriate and the better food was maybe fruits, vegetables, and nuts. But we found through even our own experimentation that man has so tampered with that product that it no longer resembles what it was then. I mean, it's cosmetically nice, it has a long shelf life, but nutritionally it's really pretty poor. Even if you go strictly organic, it's very difficult to get the sustenance you need. We tried it, even for a small person like I am. I mean, I would have to sit down in the morning when we were on fruit, and I'd have, 12 oranges and a pile of nuts, and then 4 hours later I'd be, having a pile of carrots. And I mean, we would be consuming so much volume and still not have the stamina that we think was intended when those products, those fruits, those vegetables were put on this planet. And we feel like that's just an indication that this planet is time to have a recycling time for a break. And that, I mean, as our containers can react to that, the plants can react to that pretty severely as a negative, but really, that's a merciful thing for the planet. The planet has served well, it needs a break. The population has overtaxed it, can't support the life on this planet anymore. And even though we're talking possibly about, major loss of vehicles or containers, we also know that that's really not what is of value here anyway. It's what's inside the container that is of value. And we know that nothing of value will be lost. So there's a big picture happening now, and you can look to the scientific community and they'll tell you about an ecosystem that is beyond repair by humans. An ozone layer that is, as we all know, got a very big hole in it. And you can turn to the TV evangelists and they know that something's happening. The increase in UFO sightings, that all of that is not business as usual on this planet. There is something significant happening out there. And if people, even the media tries to sweep it under the carpet, but if you look at the weather systems, the natural catastrophes that have happened, it all adds up to this. There is something major going on here. And what we're telling you is a part. It is move-up time. Just as, let's say in the animal kingdom, if you look at a gorilla who now has the capacity to use a Macintosh computer, or a dolphin who communicates with its master, those spirits, or whatever you want to call that life force that's in that vehicle, is pushing the upper envelopes of what they can perform, and they're ready for a new set of clothes, a new container that has greater capacities, and it's time for them to move up. And it's the same thing in the human kingdom. There are humans who have experienced so much of the spectrum of what is available at the human kingdom that they are ready to move up. And it's all peaking at this time. And we're not going to, play the prophet and say it's going to happen on this day or that day, but we know that this is a certain segment of time that has been talked about for a long period and is very significant to all of us.
And one of the main reasons we don't have the time or the date is simply that the next level waits and sees what the response is to this second wave or second harvest or second rapture, whatever you want to call it. In other words, it's like as this information goes out there and people respond, the next level may let things continue and keep everything under control so people have time to go through their changeover. And we don't know whether one person's going to respond, or 100, or 1,000, or 100,000, 144,000. But we don't know what's going to happen. So we're playing it, and sort of day by day on what they tell us is happening. So we look to the next level for everything that we do, and when it's time for us to know all these more details of how it all works, we feel like we'll be filled in with.
Okay, it says in here that the next level has no time, but yet there is only a certain time where the individuals who have chosen to shed their humanness and go to the next level can do so. So what happens to the people, like when your leaders came down in 1975 or around that time? What happens to people who were on the same path as you and who had chosen to go up to the next level and their physical bodies died? Did they just miss their chance, or what happens to their souls? I mean, do they come back to another human form and start their whole path again, or do they still have their knowledge, or do they go on?
Okay. It's our understanding that if, say, tomorrow one of us were to be hit by a truck or something and lose our vehicle, that nothing that we had accomplished up until this point would be lost. And if we had reached a stage where the next level determined that the soul occupying this body, this vehicle, was viable, compatible with the next level vehicle, then it would receive that new vehicle. If that individual is not ready to do that, then the next level would certainly make the necessary arrangements for that soul to pick up on its lessons wherever it left off. As far as what happens to all those spirits or souls out there that don't come in contact with this information, we don't have enough knowledge about that to speak about it accurately, any more than we can say, draw any meaning from there are millions of fish in the sea, and a few get caught and a few get eaten, and so what happens to the ones that don't get caught? I mean, it's just, there's only so much information we've got about the whole picture.
We just know that it goes in cycles. Like, we have very little record, but we know there was like Atlantis, Lemuria, there were previous civilizations. We know this one's running for approximately 6,000 years, it's about to end. There's going to be a recyclement of all of the environment, and all we've been told is that anything that's worth keeping, that's in forward motion, that's valuable, will be saved, will be replanted, and the whole thing will start again. But we don't know exactly the details, and we don't think we're supposed to know. In other words, it's just beyond what we're supposed to know.
You pretty much have poo-pooed, let's back up. You talked about conventional paths like religion, and then there's the unconventional paths that you refer to, like the zillion and one new age avenues that you can take. And you pretty much inadvertently or intentionally discredited them, or said, well, in fact, they're not what they appear to be. They're really Luciferian, or they're of dubious origin, and so you want to stay away from them. Are you in your view, are there any other paths that will result in this evolution? I mean, are you saying that you 48 people are the only souls that are going to make an evolutionary jump? Is there are there other paths that this could result in that aren't your particular path? Are you the only 48 people who have access to the truth and to the idea of evolution?
First of all, let me say that any path that gets you to the top of the mountain is fine. And we would encourage people to pursue whatever path they feel inclined to pursue, as long as they don't find that that's a stopping place. Because once you arrive at feeling like, well, you've got all the answers, but you still remain in the human condition, then you're still in the human condition. What we're saying is that, to the best of our knowledge, the information we're sharing with you is the only way off the mountain. And we would be dishonest to say that we think otherwise. It would be like us saying, well, we're sorry, we know that this is the only way, but we'd rather not talk about it. And deprive those souls that are ready to take this leap the opportunity to do so. Because our concern is that there are some souls ready for this step. And those are the ones we're trying to reach. This opportunity may not come to them again. And so our focus is on helping those individuals take that step if that's what they want to do.
Okay, so in your view, you are the only path, or at least the only path that you know of. You were the sole purveyors of truth, and I don't mean it in an egotistical way. This is like you're it.
Maybe we could approach this from another angle. Let's just try a whole different way of looking at it. This is like a family reunion. Okay? In other words, we're part of a family, of the soul, not of the vehicles. Okay? What we're doing is we're here looking for other members of the family. Now, as we tried to say, and it's hard to talk about this because we've all been programmed that this is nonsense, but it's like there's a lot of families. Okay? And therefore, if you follow certain spiritual techniques, you can join other families. You may even be able to go to another star system with the Ashtar Command or something. They may come here and pick people up. We don't know. But what we're saying is this is the only way that you enter what our family is, where we want to go, where people are genderless, where they are mere children. They're not gods. They're little children starting out as little babes, in a kingdom level where they look to a father, to a line of fathers. In other words, this is the structure of this family. And those who are interested in joining this family will recognize that these are the family traits that they want. There's many other families, and those methods may well work to get them into those families. So it's more a choice of which family you want to belong to than this is the only way. This is the only way into this particular family.
So you're not saying that the other families are corrupt or misguided or Luciferian, or are you?
We're saying the other families are either mammalian or reptilian or something other than purely androgynous beings.
I don't want to dominate this
Right.
question.
Well, it's okay, but
We
it's
want
a
to
good
get to
question.
the bottom of your,
Yeah, and
the answer.
see, the bottom line is that anything in this experiment can be used for growth. It's not what you get into that's that important, it's what you get out of. And it's perfectly natural, perfectly commonsensical to think in terms of, if you're going to go to a place that's totally different, their ways of acting, their ways of thinking, their ways of the things they like to do, the behavior, the function that they have is all very different. You have to leave the old ways behind. If you really wanted to become, a Frenchman that could go over to France and blend in, and no one would know that you were from somewhere else, well, then you'd probably study pretty hard of their culture and their language and their etiquette and everything about them so that you could go there and be one of them. Well, that's like what we're doing. Now, all these other things, all these other roads, all these other options, religions, spiritual paths, they can all accomplish giving a soul certain lessons and certain experiences, but unfortunately, most of it is going to show you what's not real. But it doesn't mean it's a negative while you're in it. The only negative is staying with it so long that you get stuck in it. And so we're saying that after you've gone through so many searches, so many paths, you've meditated to where you feel like the nothingness as, you're part of that nothingness, which to us doesn't make sense. So we've done those kind of things, and we've believed in them to some degree over, before we met our teachers. But it didn't get us to what we felt was solid, real service in a kingdom level that was real. So this put all the pieces together in our computers. And if it doesn't for somebody else, well, then we say, go for what puts the pieces together for you. But we feel like anyone who's going to want to be out of the human kingdom, eventually, if they're given the chance, will have to come upon a formula that separates them totally from the human kingdom.
And we also do think that this is the only formula that will have you overcome death. That you will not have to go through that recycling process again. Because whether the other families that Matt was talking about, they are subject to death and decay. It's only when you make an actual kingdom level leap, an actual transition into this kingdom level, can you leave behind that recycling process. So we are, in a sense, very literally overcoming
In other words,
death.
all the other things are part of a holographic classroom. But the only place where you're going to have, everlasting life and all these things is outside of this whole time and space continuum. And the only thing that's outside of time and space is the thing that created time and space as an experiment, and that's the kingdom of heaven, the evolutionary level above human. And that's where we feel like we're going. And others, like when you say only the 48 or whatever, everybody, anybody out there who wants to do this can do it. So, it's not like it's limited. It's not like some elitist thing. Anybody out there can do it if they want to do it.
Also want to clarify that I don't know where the number 48 came from, but we don't know exactly how many there are doing this.
There were 24 there were 24 people that completed the 18 years in seclusion in the monastery, however you want to phrase it, for lack of a better word. 100 started, 24 finished, and since then it's expanded as people have joined. We don't know where we stand.
I was just wondering, for instance, T, when she left, or he left in her body.
Right. Got that right.
Was this a up in ship, or was this a physical death? I'm just wondering if there's a contradiction in terms here. I'm trying to.
No, it was a physical death of the vehicle. In other words, the body died.
Okay.
And the soul occupying that body returned to its rightful place in the heavens, returned to its body in the heavens. Now, while T was incarnate here, it was, especially towards the end of the classroom experience for her, a very frustrating experience because she was aware of a lot of knowledge, a lot of mind, if you will, surrounding her vehicle that she simply could not pull through that primitive circuitry. It was like trying to plug in, you know, a 1,000 gigawatt voltage into a tiny little wire that really was not designed to handle that. And a great deal of the information that she had to be translated to us through Do. In other words, he had to serve as a connection between us and her. Even though the words she chose were generally very simple, it was clear after he explained what her thinking was that there was a much bigger picture there than we could comprehend upon just listening to her words alone.
And she knew all along that she was here just to get him started. In other words, it's his task in the same sense that, at least for this time, it's our task to talk to you. It's not that Doe couldn't come up here and do a lot better job, but it's our chance to, you know, use what we've learned, plus we're much closer to where you're at because we haven't been up there and had, you know, been in glorified bodies and all this stuff. We're much closer, we're younger, and therefore we can relate better to what you deal with because we've dealt with it more recently. I don't know if that makes sense.
Is there an essence, not to go too far, is there an essence of compassion or that thing we call, I don't want to get, you know, not the human definition of love.
Yes.
I want to categorize it, but is
Yes.
there this
Do you-
overriding pervasive feeling involved?
Do you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation?
I have.
Okay. There's an individual on board that crew who is supposedly an android and who is supposedly devoid of all human emotions. Yet, in our view, and we could be wrong about this, he demonstrates compassion for the rest of his crew that far exceeds any compassion any of the others on that crew are capable of demonstrating.
Responsibility of duty.
Simply because he is totally willing to put himself last if he sees that that is the best way to handle the circumstance. And there are countless times when they rely on him to pull them out of a deep hole of trouble because they know they can rely on his objectivity and his ability to see the circumstance from a totally non-personal point of view. He sees it from the point of view of the interest of the crew, and he puts the crew first. And that, in our view, is demonstrating a type of compassion that's very rare at the human level.
Yes, but that's not to say that members of the next level are all of that nature without, there's emotion in the next level. There is, the feeling of love is very strong, but it's not human love. Human love usually is selfishly based. And what I'll give because I want something back, and even subconsciously. You know, like, take an example of two people who love each other. They say they love each other, and they try to act that way. And one of them all of a sudden starts to say, oh, well, I'm a little interested in going a little separate. That love can turn to hate just like that. It's an example of how fragile what humans call love is, and how it's not based on something that's real tangible and real, full of depth. But the next level's love is, first of all, for a member to say, okay, I'm going to do a task. A task is offered, or they volunteer to leave a physical body that's like a space shuttle compared to a Model T in the human kingdom. In other words, I'm going to go down to that kingdom, and I'm going to try to interface with that Model T kind of computer in order that I can tell you about it. Okay, that's what a member of the next level is willing to give up for the time period of doing that task. Now, even while he's down here doing that task, he is subject to all the misery of this environment. It would be like going into the dog pit, and mingling with the dogs and living with them and being aware that you're not a dog. And so there's a lot of love there. Plus, do you know how many times we put our older member through the ringer as far as, how slow we've been to understand certain things and to change our behavior? And he's constantly tolerant of us, but intolerant at the same time to help us grow. And, there's demonstration upon demonstration of love in the next level.
The main reason we don't talk about it is because it's very difficult to be objective and to separate, lust from love and what true love is. And so sometimes our presentation can come across as being, more intellectual, but anything that you know, you can see that we might give up on a human level is replaced a whole octave higher on that kingdom level. I mean, you have to know that if the Creator created all this, He's not going to have a kingdom level that doesn't have satisfactions and emotions, compassion that far exceeds this level. I mean, it's a whole strata higher. Just like the human kingdom has a whole set of emotions that far are, advanced of the animal kingdom. It's the same thing.
So in other words, you're not trying to get rid of a sense of humor, or you're not trying to get rid of love. You're trying to get rid of the part of it, the characteristics of it that are only human, and adapt those to the next level. So in other words, if your vehicle, if your genetic past sort of got a kick out of the humor that put somebody down, or was sarcastic, or in other words, got its kicks out of seeing somebody else's misery, or even causing it, you realize, well, gee, that's not the way next level humor is. So you abort that part of the humor, and you pull in more of a silly humor. I mean, there's nobody sillier than us. I mean, we may seem a little serious here because we're faced with this big audience, and we're not exactly, polished speakers. But in reality, when we're working together as a crew, I mean, we're pretty silly. I mean, one of the main characteristics of being able to do this task is sense of humor. If you can't keep your sense of humor, your pain quotient goes up. Because you're faced with overcoming things, and it's like the more you can laugh at it, and anybody, especially new people, can testify that if you can keep your sense of humor and laugh at yourself, laugh at what's going on,
makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, it makes the medicine go down when you add a little sugar, so it's more pleasant.
Yes.
Okay, before I speak, please don't put that up. Thank you. This is a question about, it would be referring to what the speaker in the center was talking about, with fruits being realer at an earlier time. And I'll try to figure out the space, but of all your members, are all of them white that are in your group?
So you were asking if all of our members were white. Well, there's Destin up there, and then we have where's Sky? Sky's out front, maybe, I don't know. And no, they're not all white.
Okay.
We just happen to be a white crew here.
Right, mongrels.
Yes, we have from all races.
Okay.
All races, and the age varies quite a bit too from what you probably see here. We're just doing different tasks at different times.
There.
There's no, we try to not see anybody according to race, sex, age, any of that. I mean, those are all characteristics that are...
Right, or, sexual preference in the past, like whether you're homosexual or bisexual or heterosexual, all that's got to go.
Either way.
We don't care what you did before. If you were in prison and you did something terrible, well, if you're not that person now, then we want you with us,
And we don't have the females just doing the laundry and cooking and the males doing the cars,
It just seems that everything down through time, or is it everything that you see about, let's say, aliens, secret societies, cults, if you want to use that term, is always white and always white based. And it just seems like, how can a primarily white group be rewarded with the next level if they've committed the most evil, heinous crimes throughout history?
Well, one thing is the soul. We're talking about the soul doesn't have any color. It doesn't have white, doesn't have black. It's just a soul. Now, the vehicle that it's assigned to for its most, for the lessons that it needs, it just depends on where those lessons experiences are needed. Some individual may need, just like you say, the white is probably the most corrupt of all. And so those who need those lessons in that vehicle and to overcome that may need to be in a white vehicle, whereas somebody else who may have a different set of lessons may need to be in a black vehicle. And it's not the race that's being rewarded at all. I mean, it's got nothing to do with that. It's really what you need for your overcoming at this particular time. If you need to overcome, femaleness, you may be put in a female vehicle or in a male vehicle or whatever.
One reason that T chose a female vehicle was to let it be known that there were no restrictions as far as the kingdom of heaven was concerned regarding gender of the vehicle. We know that the biblical account of Jesus and his disciples seemed to focus primarily on male followers, yet we're aware that there were plenty of females also following his teachings and adhering to them. But the stigma of that time would not allow the writers to record that as you know, what actually took place. This information is not restricted by race, creed, any of that, blood ties, whatever. Whatever package a soul happens to occupy at the time it hears this information is whatever that soul needs to overcome.
Something that's kind of funny that we chuckle about sometimes is, you know, we might go into a store, a couple of us, and then an hour later, others of us go into a store and they get us confused. And Sawyer can go be at a workplace with Destin, and they'll get them confused. I mean, one's black, one's white, so it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's what's inside. Or, you know, I may be there with another classmate who's, you know, gray-headed and, you know, a lot taller, and they say, well, we just saw you. You were in here an hour ago. And we say, no, we weren't in here an hour ago.
Well,
So
another thing is history. I mean, let's face it, the whites pretty well wrote the history books and focused on the accomplishments of the white race. I mean, just, you know, it's sort of the way it is. And, the males largely wrote the Bible and then copied the Bible throughout the Middle Ages. So it's not exactly what you'd call a real accurate, objective record of, of what's going on this planet. But in the same sense, I mean, Jesus, for whatever reasons, the next level, probably just for logistical reasons for the most part, makes sure that the souls that need to hear it are in a certain region. He didn't go to Rome, to do his ministry. He didn't go to China. He didn't go to, Egypt. He didn't go to a lot of places, Babylon, whatever, where other things were happening. And it's the same kind of thing here. For whatever reason, as far as we know so far, most of the souls that need to really hear this, at least at this moment, are here. And we don't know exactly how it all works, but we know we certainly don't have the funding to fly to China and fly, all over the world, to say nothing of all the political, complications and whatever. So it's not, it's not maybe as simple as, as we were saying.
Right, but if someone wants to help us with that funding, we won't turn it down. We're not on a pauper mission either here.
No.
But we, by the way, we did run out of funds about 4 months ago, because we sold everything we had in order to start this project, going by the realization that, well, this was right to do, will somehow be taken care of. And for a lot of us, it would be easier to stop and go get a job, because some of us, got some skills and could even be high-tech jobs, make a big dollar, and we could easily do that. But instead, we feel like there's not a lot of time, really for people to make decisions now. Things are accelerating, and so we feel like we've got to get the word out so that we can reach any souls that are looking for us, or looking for not us, but looking for the information of how to get out of this kingdom. And so we put everything on the line to do that, and all our needs are taken care of at this point by people that we ask helping us, from gas to food to lodging to all our daily needs. And this meeting isn't a plea for donations. As you can see, we would have given that pitch a long time ago, and there were more people. but you're welcome to help us if anyone feels inclined.
I have one question that's interested. How we can connect at the same time our supreme divinity and another side, our dark side. For example, my stomach every day said, give me something food. But how we can connect two things, different things, how we can take these two things to the highest consciousness. Our divinity, another side of our godliness. How we can bring this to the highest level. In another question, can we find Predel?
Can we find what?
Can we find limitation of our perfectness?
Can we find limitation to our perfection?
Yeah.
Well, we'd say, no, there's no limitation to your constantly perfecting yourself. But it takes an older member to help you do that. Take someone who's done it before. Now, the other thing about, I don't know if I understood it right, but if you were trying to figure out the difference between the dark side of the nature of humans as opposed to the good side, and how you know what's what, is that what your question is? Well, each person in this room probably has some sense of it during different parts of their day, of the things that they do that they really don't want to tell anybody about, or they wish they wouldn't do, but they keep on seeming to do it.